Freed as a young girl from the slave chambers of a Hutt crime lord, Aayla Secura became the Padawan learner of her rescuer, Quinlan Vos. The pair formed a strong bond throughout their years as master and student, and shared in many adventures together. During one disastrous mission, both Jedi lost their memories after having been captured and drugged by Ayla's uncle, part of a failed and convoluted plan meant to turn Vos to the dark side. Before all was said and done, Aayla Secura would have a brush with the dark side, orchestrated in large part by the ancient dark Jedi, Volfe Karko, whom Quinlan Vos defeated with the help of his own former teacher, the Jedi Spy Master, Thulm. Still reeling from the effects of their drug-induced amnesia, Vos submitted himself for retraining under Jedi Master Mace Windu, while Ayla's instruction continued under the guidance of Master Thulm. The day finally came where the two reunited in order to rescue Thulm, as well as Ayla's cousin, Nat Secura, from a father-son team of bloodthirsty bounty hunters. The High Council was greatly impressed by their outstanding performance on this occasion. Quinlan Vos was promoted to the rank of Master. Aayla Secura was deemed to have passed her trials, and so had earned her knighthood. During the Clone Wars, Aayla distinguished herself as one of the finest of the Jedi generals to serve the Grand Army of the Republic. She participated in the infamous Battle of Hypori, captured Aurra Sing on Deveron, and also played a pivotal role during the Siege of Selu-Kumai. A casualty of the treacherous Order 66, she was among the first to die during the Jedi Purge, which paved the way for the period known as the Dark Times. Jennir was a perfectly unremarkable Jedi Master during the events of the Clone Wars. He had served as a Jedi General, like the vast majority of his fellows. After being betrayed by his troops, he made peace with a former enemy, the Nosorian soldier, Bomo Greenbark, who had fought on the side of the Separatists during the war. The unlikely pair eventually fell in with the motley crew of the Uhumele, a smuggling vessel. Following a brief identity crisis brought on by the loss of the Jedi Order, as well as a falling out with his new friend Greenbark, Jennir struck out on his own in an effort to rediscover his sense of purpose. He never stayed in the same place for very long. He hopped from one planet to the next, attempting to regain his sense of inner balance. Wherever he went, he simply attempted to do what he thought was right. Upon reuniting with his friends, Jennir teamed up with another Jedi survivor named Kai Hudora to face the Uhumele's newest passenger. The Verpine Jedi Master, Begor Sadet, disguised himself as a potential ally in search of Jennir, though he was in truth a recently conscripted Sith agent in the service of Emperor Palpatine, determined to help hunt down the Jedi. Following Sadet's defeat, the pair of Jedi were forced into an unavoidable conflict with Darth Vader. Hudora sacrificed himself in a failed attempt to bring Vader down with him, while Jennir was left free to make his escape with the surviving crew members of the Uhumele. Though Jennir mourned the loss of his ally, Hudora went to his death confident in the knowledge that because Jennir still lived, a spark of the Jedi Order remained in the galaxy. Jennir's ultimate fate remains unknown. Hey guys, Grey Jedi 91, welcome to the next installment of the Versus series. I thought I would start by explaining the reasoning behind this matchup. Over the years, I've had a ton of requests to feature Aayla Secura in a Versus video, and it's always been my intent to honor those requests. However, Aayla is a surprisingly tricky character to feature in a project like this. It's very difficult to find a matchup with an interesting character who is neither so far beyond or beneath her own level that it would render the outcome too obvious. It was really tough for me to settle on a prominent combatant, who wouldn't be either too overpowered or underpowered to make a fight with Aayla interesting. After a lot of thought about it, I decided that Jennir was the possible answer. He's a main character in his own right, with ample source material to pull from, a solid repertoire of combat skills to his credit, and an engaging personality. Apart from this, though, I thought 2 birds, 1 stone. You see, I've always had a lot of requests over the years to feature Jennir in a character profile video. But the thing is, every time I tried to summarize Jennir's tale, I found the nature of his story too convoluted, ultimately underwhelming, and frankly a little too unwieldy to fit into a format for a project like that. Most especially because his character was not given a proper send-off. If we're honest, his story has no definitive ending. Largely because of this, Jennir is not a part of a story that I found especially compelling in the end, despite the fact I enjoyed his character for the time he was around. I don't love Dark Times the way I did Star Wars Republic. As a series, it pales somewhat in comparison. It's a product I find both somewhat incomplete and a great deal less impactful to the Star Wars mythos as a whole. Now, having said that, Jennir was still an awesome character in his own right. Essentially, he was a Jedi Ronin trying to make his way in the galaxy. In the same vein, Aayla Secura is a character I really enjoy, and not just because of her skimpy outfit. Like Jennir, I really like her as a person. She's unfailingly kind, determined, and highly competent. A strong character I feel should be remembered for more than just sex appeal. So while there is no true thematic element binding these two, beyond my own personal interest in both characters, I decided to proceed with this matchup. And so, without further ado, I present for you Aayla Secura vs. Jennir. Aayla Secura was a female Rudian Twi'lek, an indigenous species of the Ryloth star system, located in the Outer Rim. The Twi'leks were an omnivorous race of humanoids, distinguished by multiple stomachs, pointed teeth, and vibrant and varied skin tones. As a Rutian Twi'lek, Secura sported a bright blue skin tone. Dry, rocky, and barren, the planet Ryloth possessed 2 hemispheres which differed sharply in temperature, one being comprised largely of scorching, inhospitable deserts. Most Twi'leks lived in cities carved out of the cold, rocky expanses, and so possessed eyes especially well adapted for seeing in the dark. The most striking alien feature of the Twi'lek species, however, were the long fleshy growths which sprang from the back of their heads, which were called leku. The leku actually carried a portion of the Twi'lek's brain, and subtle motions of the leku were incorporated into the Twi'lek language. According to studies conducted by Jedi of the New Republic, Twi'leks were in fact a generally Force-sensitive people, and the metaphysical communication they engaged in through their leku interactions were tied to their inherent Force sensitivity. It was partially due to the deep memories stored by these organs that Plo Koon was able to help Aayla Secura overcome her amnesia by using his own telepathic powers. The leku were also extremely sensitive to pain, and if grabbed with enough force, the resulting pain would be enough to temporarily cripple the average Twi'lek. However, as disciplined warriors and frequent prisoners of war, Jedi were taught to persevere through the rigors of combat or to cope with torture, and a number of the most talented and revered swordsmen throughout the timeline have been Twi'leks who went their entire careers without being affected by this weakness. Athletically built and noted for both her stunning beauty as well as her remarkable agility, Aayla Secura masterfully demonstrated the Force-enhanced physical attributes for which the Jedi Knights were famed throughout the galaxy. With regard to strength and stamina, I think it's fair to say she was by no means weak in either field, but neither was she truly exceptional by the standards of her fellow Jedi. With regard to speed, she has been described by observers as a blur, too fast to truly be seen while locked in combat with other Force users. In addition, her incredible reflexes, as well as her development as an acrobat, better enabled her to deal with things like blast deflection and other projectile weapons. She has reacted quickly enough to avoid and leap away from explosions caused by thermal detonators with only a split second's warning. Alongside her master, she has also dodged a multitude of deadly projectiles triggered from within an ancient booby trap on Honoghr. As impressive as her ability to avoid potential injuries was, Aayla was by no means fragile and could take quite a bit of punishment when she had to. While still a Padawan, Secura also survived being hit by Force lightning by the Anzadi Dark Jedi Master, Volfe Karko. During the Clone Wars, she sustained an elbow to the jaw from Aura Singh, as well as telekinetic force blasts and grapples from her former master, Quinlan Vos, emerging from both altercations largely unscathed. However, she found herself knocking on death's door when she was violently thrown into the rafters of the derelict starship that had served as the arena for the infamous duel on Hypori. Alongside Kukruk, Shakti, and Ki-Adi-Mundi, Aayla Secura was counted among the first of General Grievous's Jedi victims to survive an altercation with him. However, it is to be noted that she would not have managed this particular feat without the direct intervention of others, as her injuries were assessed to be life-threatening by her rescuers, and it was only after they airlifted her and her companions to safety that she received medical attention. Jennir was a human male, attributed with high levels of adaptability and resiliency. Humans still lacked many of the more exotic and extreme environmental adaptations developed by so many of the alien races who inhabited the galaxy. Much like Aayla Secura, he displayed the enhanced physical attributes common to all Jedi, and against opponents of similar strength in the Force, he would have been hindered only by the limitations of his own stamina and endurance levels. While his exact age is unknown, I suspect he was considerably younger than one might expect from looking at him, especially considering his rank as a Jedi Master. His distinctive white hair was a lifelong attribute, not a mark of old age, and curiously, he appeared to be an initiate at around the same time as Barriss Offee, as the two seemed to have studied healing techniques in the same class. While it's not confirmed that the Mirialan sharing in the lesson was Offee, it has been established in other sources that she and Luminara Unduli had been the only members of their species operating within the Jedi Order during that era. So, unless we are to interpret this Mr. Mirialan as a retcon who just happens to look exactly like Barriss Offee, Jennir was likely in his mid to late 20s as of the events of Dark Times, which meant he was both still in his physical prime and also wise beyond his years. Like Aayla Secura, who was also promoted to the rank of Jedi Master at some point following the outbreak of the Clone Wars, it is something of a mystery as to how one so young managed to attain the rank of Master. However, this was not unheard of. The most usual path to mastery was for a Jedi Knight to successfully complete the training of a Padawan learner. However, it was also commonplace for Jedi Knights to undergo a modified and far more challenging version of the Trials of Knighthood. Throughout the Jedi Order's history, the Council often regarded successful completions of the modified trials a mark of mastery. Whatever the case, while the specifics of how they achieved their esteemed positions within the Order are not known to us, both Aayla Secura and Jennir clearly impressed their superiors at quite a young age. Turning our attention back to Jennir's physical capabilities, he clearly possessed a respectable measure of strength and dexterity, which he demonstrated on many occasions, most notably during his duels with Mors Damana, as well as when he scaled the side of a towering building using only his bare hands. He also augmented his strength, enabling him to kill a heavily muscled Sewer while unarmed. The Sewer were a large and very prideful alien species, known to consider those of lesser physical ability beneath them. He was a capable acrobat, though far from exceptional, and his agility could only take him so far. However, he was no pushover and would by no means crumble if forced to take a hit. He has endured a beating that resulted in several broken ribs, and continued to flee from his attackers while in such a condition. He even managed to swim a short distance to safety while in such a state, while also being pursued by a deadly predator. Overall, he was tough, quick, and strong, though I don't really think he displayed anything beyond the usual standard for most Jedi Masters who matched his level of physical conditioning. Both Aayla Secura and Jennir displayed the awe-inspiring enhanced physical attributes for which the Jedi Knights were famed throughout the galaxy. Aayla may be the quicker and more agile, and Das marginally tougher and stronger, but these factors generally balance out, and neither performs at a level that the other cannot compete with. No edge shall be awarded for physical superiority. Aayla Secura's strength in the Force was made obvious upon her first meeting with Quinlan Vos. Though still a toddler, she telepathically reached out through the Force and exuded a calming presence which gave the young and inexperienced Quinlan the peace of mind he needed to draw upon the Force himself. Not only had this event impressed Quinlan Vos and Thome, Aayla's two future instructors, it also hinted at the role she would play later on as Quinlan Vos's source of strength and comfort during troubled times. Meanwhile, Jennir's early career was met with little fanfare. His own teachers described him as merely average in all areas, with no particular specialities within the realm of Force abilities to speak of. Like Elizabeth and Wandung Esterhazy, also known as Scout, his connection to the Force simply wasn't very strong, and his early development as a Jedi was somewhat stunted because of this. While his own instructors voiced their belief that he would never be a truly great Jedi, they also acknowledged that he did indeed concentrate hard on his studies and always tried his best. As a result of his hard work and ability to rise to the occasion by pushing himself as far as he could, he eventually grew into a capable knight. Aayla Secura and Jennir demonstrated themselves to be skilled with many of the same Force abilities, with only a couple of outlying factors in either case. Their prowess with Force augmentation has been covered in large part during the analysis of their physical capabilities. While this manifested itself in different ways, the enhanced reflexes possessed by both greatly influenced their fighting styles, which we will examine later. Switching gears, we'll now turn our attention to their skills with telepathy. On the most passive level, both have demonstrated formidable Force sense capabilities. Both have avoided potential hazards or ambushes due to the premonitions of danger granted to them by their connection to the Force. Jennir in particular was a keen observer, as he was able to assess situations by calling upon the Force. This also made him a capable tactician and enabled him with the ability to operate swiftly and decisively with very little in the way of prep time. Alongside Kai Hudora, who was also able to see through Begor Sadet's ruse, both Jedi sensed almost immediately that Sadet was not to be trusted. Jennir was also able to conceal his own realization from Sadet himself, which is what allowed him to turn the tables on the aspiring Sith acolyte. Similar to Jennir's ability to sense Begor Sadet's deception, Aayla Secura was also able to sense the truth of Quinlan Vos's dark intentions during their mission to Honoghr, during which he betrayed her. She was able to sense the life forces of her mentors, and could even sense when they were in an injured state from a distance, likely a result of Force-imbued empathy. Impressively, she was also able to hone in on Aurra Singh's location, despite the fact the Dark Jedi was actively attempting to throw her off her trail by distracting her. In addition to all this, Aayla Secura has engaged in telepathic communication. This power is what facilitated her and Thome's ability to raise Quinlan's morale during his time of need. While trapped underwater, she has also communicated with Kit Fisto, with whom she was very close, and she may have even actually engaged in a romantic relationship with the Jedi Master. Defensively, Aayla Secura has resisted the potent effects of a feline male's pheromones. This is especially impressive, as the pheromones exuded by the reptomammalian species gave them a quasi-hypnotic effect. This attribute of the feline people enhanced their attractiveness and compelled others to be more inclined to agree with what they had to say. Even Ayla's own Jedi Master, Quinlan Vos, nearly killed himself when compelled to, and if not for Ayla's own strength of will, he would have. Offensively, Aayla has used her telepathy to compel weak-minded criminals to defuse potentially hostile situations, and on one occasion she has even used her powers to force a Devaronian sentry to fall asleep. Jennir has also succeeded in utilizing the Jedi mind trick, as he has coaxed the truth out of unwilling law enforcement officials, while also talking his way out of being detained. Both also displayed some measure of skill with the beast trick ability as well, though Jennir displayed far more frequent use of the power while on the planet Prime. Like KotOR, another prominent Jedi from the Dark Times era, Jennir's use of the power was not based around an attempt to dominate the mind of and outright control a beast, but rather the ability to form a bond with the creature through the Force. Due to his relative weakness in the Force, some of Jennir's feats have even left him in a state of mild exhaustion. Still, his telepathic abilities aren't truly outshone by Aayla, who, despite her seemingly greater strength in the Force, possesses no extreme telepathic powers that would impact the matchup in any way. As such, their telepathic prowess will not factor into the final verdict. Neither were truly committed or masterful Jedi healers, though both demonstrated some measure of skill in this field. Secura appeared capable of healing minor injuries, or at the very least easing the pain of others. That's as far as her skill with this particular ability appears to extend. Jennir has done the same, but also a great deal more. He failed to heal Ember Chinkali after she sustained a wound from blaster fire, but this appeared to be chiefly due to his compromised state of mind at the time. He experienced much greater success with the power during periods of clarity. He was able to ease the suffering of Dado, a boy who had lost his hand to Mors Damana on Telerath. He was also able to call upon the Force to heal his injured mount on Prime, though Jennir himself considered his success to be partially the result of luck, as healing was not his specialty by his own admission. On at least one occasion, he strained himself to the point that he actually lost consciousness and collapsed due to the level of exertion required by him to use the Force in this manner. Despite these shortcomings, he was still able to perform a successful healing trance, which enabled him to recover from a vicious beating in an extremely short period of time. Though his ribs were still broken, he had healed them to the point that he could comfortably walk around mere hours after sustaining the injuries in the first place. On the basis of what can be observed, Jennir was clearly the more capable healer between the two. Sadly for him, though, his talents weren't developed to the point that I think he'd be able to call upon them during an actual fight. For this reason, his skills as a Jedi healer will not factor into the final verdict. Where Jennir excelled ahead of Aayla Secura in the realm of Force healing, she learned to cloak herself within the Force for stealth purposes, both from Quinlan Vos and Thulm. Force stealth is, to my mind, more accurately described as a host of separate abilities than a single specific power, as it can manifest in several different ways. The variant utilized by Aayla and her teachers allowed them to entirely mask their presence within the Force. What is more, they could do so effortlessly, and were even able to use this power to hide from fellow Jedi. By obscuring their presence from the minds of others, they could walk freely while existing beyond the perception of their opponents. This was something deeper than mere invisibility. They left no traces behind, not even their scent, no hint of their passing, by cloaking themselves from the minds of those around them. Although I wouldn't say she mastered this technique quite as fully as her instructors did, she came pretty damn close. Her facility with this power made her an expert infiltrator, and even enabled her to hide her presence from Sora Bulk, a dark Jedi Master of great skill and considerable power. However, much as can be said of Jennir's skills with healing, Aayla's skills with stealth simply aren't all that applicable in the context of a fight. As remarkable as her skills are, they simply won't impact the final result of this matchup. Aayla Secura has also shown off some familiarity with Tutaminis, which she utilized in order to shield her allies from blaster fire which strayed beyond her blade guard. While she certainly hasn't mastered the ability to the point where I think she'd be able to employ it as a defense against opposing lightsaber blades, the power does still have merit here, as Jennir was one of the relatively few Jedi who regularly employed a blaster pistol. Up until this moment, I've been analyzing the entire array of the respective abilities in order to give a full accounting of their stature as Force wielders. The truth, though, is that the only power which both possess that's likely to come into play during a fight on even ground is telekinesis. Both have used the power for a variety of purposes. Aayla has used her abilities to levitate allies out of danger, while Jennir appears to have been capable of using self-levitation, which he employed for display purposes only, while locked in combat with a number of common thugs who had not realized they were tangling with a Jedi. Beyond this, both actively employed their powers during combat on a number of occasions: telekinetically guided attacks and saber throws, retrievals of fallen weapons, direct strikes using force pushes, pulls, and grapples, employed to bat around organic adversaries or else to dismantle combat droids. All were commonplace within their respective repertoires. Where they differed is that Aayla Secura has demonstrated greater lethality, though it must be noted that the most extreme cases where she has done so have been during times when she was out of her mind and drawing upon the dark side, or else when others had exhausted her patience. The most notable example of the latter being when she employed a force choke while interrogating a corrupt Deveronian bureaucrat who had betrayed her allies and was impeding her investigation. Though again, she typically conducted herself with far more restraint than this. Jennir has employed telekinesis in nearly all of the same ways, though with considerably less grace or fluidity. It is true that he employed his powers somewhat less often than Aayla did, but he was also impeded by the fact that it wasn't prudent for him to reveal his strength in the Force in the aftermath of Order 66. And in all fairness, this is something Secura never had to deal with. However, given how much he has struggled with other applications of the Force, I don't think he could have employed his powers with quite the same gusto that Aayla displayed, even if he weren't encumbered by the fact that he usually had to conceal his nature as a Jedi during the dark times. Aayla Secura and Jennir possessed similar levels of magnitude, but not similar levels of aptitude. Jennir utilizes his powers with a similar level of strength backing them up, but he does so far less often, and with somewhat less ease than Aayla does. The flashes of power that can be witnessed on those rare occasions when Aayla was being ruled by her emotions show us what she might have become had she fallen to the dark side. As it is, I think he can only hope to compete with Aayla for a time, given that she appears both stronger in the Force than he does, and also showed a superior knack for integrating her abilities into her martial arts technique. For this reason, Aayla Secura gets the edge as a Force wielder. Both Jedi wielded standard lightsabers. The only notable differences between the two weapons were cosmetic in nature, such as the designs of the two hilts and the colors of the blades. Both weapons functioned to an equal or near equal degree. Normally, this would be an open and shut case here and now. However, there is one additional factor to consider. Following Order 66, Jennir made far heavier use of blasters than his lightsaber when he was forced to fight. While the make and model of his chosen weapon may have differed, throughout the Dark Times, he was never without access to a blaster, to the point that it became a standard part of his equipment. He was, without a doubt, unusually skilled in their use. His Force-enhanced reflexes granted him incredible reaction time as well as accuracy. He has proven capable of shooting weapons out of the hands of their wielders without physically harming them. He has eliminated entire rooms full of adversaries using only his blaster pistol in conjunction with his agility. However impressive as his skills may have been, though, I don't really see them as a total game changer here. Aayla Secura has displayed great skill with blast deflection, and this extended to a strong showing against Aura Singh, who was herself a Force user and, like Jennir, would have been capable of using the weapon with greater accuracy and timing than a non-Force sensitive. Keeping that last point in mind, it should go without saying that I don't believe Jennir would be able to rest on his laurels just because he employs a blaster, where Aayla does not. However, he does still have an alternative mode of attack, which she lacks, and therefore has more options at his disposal. Jennir gets the edge in armament. Diverging somewhat from the paths of her two Jedi Masters, who made it their business to hunt down the mysterious Sith Lord pulling the strings, Aayla Secura burst onto the scene of the Clone Wars, beginning with the destructive conflict's seminal battle at Geonosis. One of the few Jedi Knights among Masters to survive that hellish day, Secura did not play as active a role during the secretive War of Shadows waged by the Spy Master Thulm and his compatriots. In contrast, Aayla Secura became a staple on the open fields of battle, and usually fought on the front lines alongside her troops. Described as one of the most capable of the Jedi generals who served during the Clone Wars, Secura was greatly respected for her courage and leadership ability by both her fellow Jedi as well as the troopers who followed her. Her accomplishments were numerous, and her experience extensive, given her youth. She has brought groups of common thugs to their knees without even igniting her lightsaber, employing her expertise as an unarmed combatant. On more than one occasion, she has blocked blaster bolts fired at her from point-blank range. What is more, she has done so with incredible accuracy. She was equally at home when forced to engage in a melee with a broad array of opponents, many of whom, such as Morjakai and Anzadi, prided themselves on their ability to go toe-to-toe with Jedi. As the Padawan of Quinlan Vos, Aayla Secura followed in the footsteps of her mentor, and specialized with Ataru, the fourth form of the classical lightsaber fighting forms. A complex yet dynamic martial art requiring great discipline and exceptional footwork, Ataru required Jedi to attack from all axes of motion, and was best suited to those who possessed a talent for physical augmentation. A style which stressed using one's entire body as a weapon, Ataru was a highly acrobatic form that called for one to remain in almost constant motion, and nearly always on the offensive. As such, the form was extremely exhaustive and ill-suited to drawn-out engagements. It was best employed in swift, concentrated, yet devastating bursts. Aayla was noted to have mastered the form years earlier than was expected of her. Considered a soft option when faced with multiple opponents, Aayla has compensated for this weakness of Ataru. She's proven her skill by utilizing the form against many enemies at once, including elite cloned Morjakai warriors, born and bred for combat. She also relied on the form for acrobatic evasions when faced with an opponent's overwhelming offensive. She rarely allowed herself to be forced into a truly defensive position, and instead attempted to dance around her opponent's attack sequences or simply bat away blaster fire, all the while attempting to advance her position by closing the distance. She made heavy uses of kicks to stun or off-balance her adversaries, or else to leave them vulnerable, as she would follow up with an offensive lightsaber sequence of her own. Aayla Secura was not one to pull her punches, and a great many of her enemies found themselves missing bits and pieces of themselves following confrontations with her. While Ataru was her preferred style, she backed this up with a strong foundation in Form 5 as well. Comprised of two subforms with similar elements, Form 5 was geared around the idea of turning one's opponent's offense against them. Shan was the variant associated with blaster-wielding opponents. Gemso was geared specifically for lightsaber combat. While I consider it probable that she studied both variants, she is only officially credited with knowledge of Gemso in the Episode 3 visual dictionary. Still, though, I believe she employed both applications of the martial art, and I also theorize that this is what made her so capable with accurate blast deflection even at close range. While this is just me speculating, I believe that she transitioned between acrobatic evasions and Ataru offensives, and alternated these patterns with Shan and Gemso maneuvers throughout the various stages of her bout with Aurra Sing. She likely would have used Shan to return oncoming blaster fire directly back to its source, destroying the projectile weapon in the process, rallying from setbacks with acrobatic recoveries by switching to Ataru. To close the distance, she'd transition again. She'd take the initiative by breaking off a saber lock and pressuring her opponent with Gemso, and so on. Far and away, her greatest accomplishment as a duelist was her defeat and arrest of the altogether infamous Aurra Sing, a noted Jedi hunter trained by the Dark Woman, who proved herself capable of standing against and even defeating a number of the most capable Jedi of the age, with Sharad Het being one of her most notable kills, though she even had a confrontation against a young Obi-Wan Kenobi and his master Qui-Gon Jinn under her belt. Aayla Secura was a solid general-purpose martial artist, and I wouldn't say that she was necessarily more at home in single combat with opposing Force wielders than she was when faced against hordes of mercenaries, battle droids, or bounty hunters. She was competent and confident in both realms. While she was tossed aside by the likes of General Grievous on Hypori due to the shock value of his technique, his great skill, and her own fatigue, and was also pretty soundly defeated by Quinlan Vos on Honoghr, her skills still made her extremely viable. I'm not sure I have a firm grasp on what her exact shortcomings or weaknesses as a lightsaber duelist would have been. We never really saw her make any egregious errors in judgment or wildly miscalculate a situation. By the same token, we never saw her face off against any of the most notable opponents of the age, aside from Aurra Sing, of course. Still, though, defeating Aurra Sing was a very solid achievement, and one that I personally feel should be respected more. Her potential was great, as was made obvious very early on, and while her deeds and accolades may have paled somewhat in comparison to those of her fellow masters, I find this to be merely the result of the fact that she has less experience than most of them did. I'll go on record by saying that on her worst day, I would still see her as a solid match for several low to mid-tier council masters, capable of at least standing her ground. On her best, there were a few I could even see her defeating, given the right circumstances. She was a rising star at the time of her death, not a fully developed paragon within the Order. Highly talented, but sadly killed before she'd reached her peak or the height of her powers. While not exactly a living legend in her own right, Aayla Secura was still a formidable warrior and very worthy of the title Jedi Master. Not too much is known about Jennir's early combat training, nor even his reputation within the Jedi Order as a whole. We don't know anything about his instructors' skill sets, or how he may have modeled himself after their example, and when it comes to which forms he was likely to study, all we can do is speculate. Like Aayla Secura, Jennir has demonstrated great skill with unarmed combat. By drawing upon the Force, he has quickly and efficiently overwhelmed a wide variety of opponents using only his bare hands. He has also augmented his physical strikes to give the illusion of inhuman strength, covertly disguising Force pushes by making them appear to be nothing more than physical blows. While he participated in a number of confrontations, we only have one actual lightsaber duel to draw conclusions from, but even in that fight, there are a number of factors to consider which make it highly unusual. He utilized his lightsaber in conjunction with his blaster when fighting on the front lines and against multiple opponents. As outlined in the Jedi Path, mounted combat was recognized as an alternative fighting form in its own right, and on Prime, Jennir displayed great skill in this field, facilitated no doubt by his skill with the Beast Trick ability. His skills with blast deflection were also impressive. On one occasion, he even returned a bolt fired from a distant droid sniper back to its source, without looking nor even devoting the majority of his attention to the danger at hand. Aside from all this, Jennir participated in 3 notable contests of swordsmanship, 2 against the Chagrian champion, Mors Damana, and 1 against the Sith hopeful, Begor Sadet. We'll discuss the contests against Damana first. Damana had established himself as the most skilled duelist on Telerath, and was the chief enforcer of the slaver group headed by Boss Muzori. On Telerath, the law only permitted conflicts to be solved through use of the blade, the belief being that this practice would preserve peace and honor. During their first encounter, largely considered a test of Jennir's abilities, the Jedi gave the Chagrian Swordmaster a great fight before conceding the match. During their second match, Jennir ended the contest with one swift, fluid stroke, revealing that he had allowed Damana to win their prior engagement on purpose. I'll give Jennir credit for prolonging the contest while giving the illusion of inferiority, as well as for being able to adjust to the unusual heft and feeling of a sword, as opposed to the weightless blades emitted by lightsabers. However, this fight isn't really all that germane to the issue of establishing Jennir's actual level of skill with the lightsaber beyond this. While Damana was highly skilled, he was no Force wielder, and he couldn't have hoped to challenge Jennir in quite the same way that a Jedi or Sith could. So with that in mind, we'll turn our attention to the far more relevant fight between Jennir and Begor Sadet. It is to be noted that Jennir had every conceivable advantage in his corner, and still, he only barely managed to subdue his enemy. Jennir was joined in this fight by fellow Jedi Kai Hudora. The Dark Jedi was able to isolate and separate the 2 combatants, better enabling him to focus on only one at a time. In addition, the fight was interrupted at various intervals by armed guards and various crew members of the Uhu melee, many of whom were either killed or maimed by Sadet. At one point, Sadet actually brought Jennir to his knees by hammering at his crumbling defenses, and was on the verge of ending the fight then and there. He would have if not for the timely intervention of Hudora. Jennir had knowledge of his opponent's reputation as a lightsaber duelist. He knew what he was dealing with. He had the numbers on his side, as well as the element of surprise prior to springing his trap. And yet, he still almost lost, and only survived by the skin of his teeth. At the end of the day, even though the Jedi had engineered this entire ordeal, the fight reflected far better on Sadet than it did on Jennir himself. Count Dooku, one of the most celebrated lightsaber instructors within the Jedi ranks prior to his departure from the Order, criticized most of his contemporaries for having allowed their dueling skills to fall into disuse. To be fair, this was not an altogether unforeseen outcome, as Jedi of this era really didn't have much occasion to face lightsaber-wielding opponents. Unfortunately, this meant that many Jedi, even certain Jedi Masters, found themselves at a disadvantage when faced with a more dedicated lightsaber duelist. Jennir fell into this very trap, a common pitfall for Jedi of his generation. Skilled as he was ill-prepared to deal with true master duelists. This isn't to say that he didn't know what he was doing, but he was far less refined than one might have hoped. Based on what can be observed, Jennir has demonstrated skill with elements of the first, second, and fifth forms of lightsaber combat, Shicho, Makashi, and Shan. Nearly all Jedi had a foundation in Shicho, through which they learned to become conduits of the Force. Improvisation combined with pure evasion. This was likely Jennir's default form, simplistic, basic, and to the point, but normally ill-suited for lightsaber duels. It was seen as a decent fallback option and training form, but little beyond that. Considering Jennir's general sensibilities and lack of any particular strengths and relative weakness in single combat against opposing Force wielders, Shicho was most likely his primary form. He employed a number of moves seemingly inspired by Makashi during his first bout with Demana, lunging and parrying, fighting mostly with one hand. He also injured Sadet with a well-placed thrust. It stands to reason he may have dabbled with Makashi to answer Shicho's weakness in blade-to-blade altercations. His skill with blast deflection and the reverse grip he used to sever Demana's sword arm suggest moderate skill with Shan as well, though as Shan did not normally serve to address lightsaber-wielding opponents directly, skill in this field would only take him so far in a contest like this. While I do think he drew from each of these forms to craft his own personal style, I don't think he truly mastered any particular fighting form. I think he employed each form with just enough skill in order to get by. What he lacks is the fluidity and presence of mind to switch things up in the moment, in the midst of the fight. For this reason, it's my opinion that he could have truly excelled as a lightsaber duelist if he had dedicated himself to the study of Naman, the sixth form of lightsaber combat. He has an excellent foundation for the study of the form, but as a result of incomplete training in that regard, he lacks the adaptability and grace one could expect from a true Naiman master. Once things start to spiral out of his control, he can quickly become overwhelmed, and even more problematic, in situations like these, he desperately flounders on with the same approach. He lacks a means of switching things up in a meaningful way in order that he might regain control of the situation. In sharp contrast to Aayla Secura, who seems just as at home and at her ease whether she's participating in a battle or in a duel, Jennir seems far better prepared for the former than he is for the latter. And this just about sums up my feeling for how this matchup would conclude. With this in mind, we now move on to the verdict. When looking at the sort of fighter that he is, he's clearly more reactive than he is proactive, and he would almost certainly surrender the lead to Aayla Secura, allowing her to dictate the terms of the early fight. A more skillful duelist than he may be able to turn the tables on Aayla by waiting for her to overextend herself, or simply tire out due to Ataru's exhaustive nature. Ataru comes with the weakness of not being all that sustainable, and Gemso, the other form at Aayla's disposal, is noted for the weakness of limited mobility. The two forms are hopelessly incongruous. Aayla Secura would be forced to divide her focus between one form or the other, always able to draw upon the strengths of one, but never both simultaneously. The irony is that Jennir appears to have practiced with a far more complementary set of styles, and on paper, he should be the more adaptable between the two. But his approach simply doesn't have the dynamism that hers does. He is not only encumbered by the same weaknesses that she is, he hasn't even developed his skill with the most relevant form he has at his disposal, Makashi, to the same level that she has taken both Ataru and Gemso. This all boils down to the question of which of them would be able to make better use of their form's advantages in this fight, and to my mind there can be no question that Aayla Secura is the most likely to triumph here. Even if Jennir's defenses held under her Ataru onslaught, his ability to retaliate would be hampered a great deal by her ability to employ Gemso counteroffensives. Once we take into account how elusive and acrobatic she is, again, facilitated in large part by her strong mastery of Ataru, Jennir's situation only appears to grow even more dire. I do think he'd make her work hard for a victory, but really, all he'd be able to do is postpone the inevitable. Jennir has what it takes to hold his ground against Aayla for a time, but in the end, she has all the tools she needs at her disposal to gradually, and more importantly, reliably wear him down. Aayla Secura gets the edge as a martial artist and lightsaber duelist, and because this is the category most likely to determine the final outcome of this fight, I also name her the victor.